Welcome to The Get Together! It's our show about ordinary people building extraordinary communities. I'm your host, Bailey Richardson. I'm a partner at People & Company and a co-author of Get Together, How to Build a Community with Your People.
Yeah. And I'm Kevin Huynh, Bailey's co-host today, also a partner at People & Company. That's our strategy company where we help organizations build meaningful communities.
In each episode of our podcast, we interview everyday people who have built extraordinary communities about just how they did it. How did they get the first people to show up? How did they grow to hundreds, maybe even thousands more members? Today, we're talking to the leaders of NOW, Colombe Cahen-Salvador, Andrea Venzon, and Laura Giani. In 2016, Colombe, Laura, and Andrea were devastated by the UK's decision to leave the European Union. Colombe is French, and Andrea and Laura are Italian, so for them, the EU is a symbol of a more open and global society. The team completely changed their lives to start a political party. Colombe and Andrea created Volt, a brand new pan-European party. They were the first people to attempt and succeed in building a continent-wide political party in the history of the European Union. But in doing so, they realized two things. First, they observed that the biggest issues of our time are global issues that even national party politics are unable to respond to sufficiently. Issues like climate change, regulating the tech giants, taxing those big global companies, and protecting human rights. Action will be meaningless, they realize, unless the whole world joins in. Second, they noticed that today's youth are energized about political issues, but not about politics. While the young generation is as ambitious and idealistic as ever, most young people's thoughts on politics seem limited to, who should I vote to stop? Thus today, informal, quasi-leaderless digital-first movements are taking the role formerly occupied by political parties to rally supporters and make the case for change. So Colombe, Andrea, and Laura have been working over the last year on a global campaign called NOW, to unite and solve shared global challenges. Through developing leaders around the world and coordinating actions together, members of NOW put pressure on governments to pass into law shared solutions to those huge global challenges. Kevo, what's one thing you learned from our conversation today with the NOW team?
You know, what I'm going to be thinking about after this interview is the power of finding common calls to action among very different people in different places with different backgrounds. You know, to me now is figuring this out live. For instance, connecting people around the world to put more women in power, to shift representation of women in political offices. Now what that looks like and how to make it happen may look very different depending on the place. But at a high level, it's what many people care about. And they can learn from each other and inspire each other to help make more of that happen. So I think even if you're building a smaller community around an interest or profession and you wouldn't consider yourself a political movement, there's a lesson there, right? How you probably have an opportunity to find that common call to action and enable your people to act on it together. You as a leader or an organizer have that visibility to kind of see where the commonality lies.
I love that. You ready to jump in, Kev?
Yes, let's jump in.
Yeah! All right. Colombe, Laura, and Andrea, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I'm so inspired by your work, and I can't wait to have this conversation today. We really feel like people who are doing work to organize communities of people, they can't fake the funk, as we like to say. You know, they're motivated by something personal and meaningful to them in the work that they do. So I'm curious, you know, what drove you, each of you perhaps, whether it was your upbringing, your personality, maybe life experiences, to change your life and devote yourself to a political movement?
Thank you so much, Billis, for these opportunities. We're very delighted to be here. I'll take this first question. I think that obviously each one of us has different experience, so I'm going to speak for myself. But I think that the whole motive behind the work that we started, first focus on Europe and now with a global perspective, is the fact that people actually have the same hopes and dreams across borders, and they really want to have a way to get together and express these hopes and dreams and work together to achieve some results. And this was clear for us during our first work that we did on Europe during the European elections, when it was clear that at least a significant amount of the population of Europe felt like we came from the same background. We had the same way of, hoping for a different kind of politics, a different kind of vision of the future of our continent. But there was no way to express that. All our political parties, movements, and social movements were really nationally focused. And so we gave a house to these people, or at least we gave a way for these people to build a house. And together we built, communities all over Europe, and we're going to talk about this later. But we found a way to bridge differences and bring people to work together. And the same happened when we actually shifted our focus to the global level, and this is what we're doing right now. And we noticed that there is absolutely no reason for people from different cultures or different, religious groups or simply different continents not to work together to tackle the biggest challenges of our times. And obviously, the pandemics we're living into is one of them. For me, the idea of actually bringing people together across borders and giving them a meaningful way to engage on the topics that are defining our lives is definitely what brought me to take on these activities.
I'm coming from a different experience from Andrea and Colombe, because I just jumped straight into now when I saw Andrea and Colombe launching it in January of this year. The project of now really gave me the space to do some good in the world. So I took the plunge and I joined Andrea and Colombe in this new project of now.
One thing I'd love to point out, just because, I'm an American and Kev's an American, and we, haven't had the exact same experiences of what you call the Erasmus generation. That's, to me, seems like such an important, rich insight that you have had and are taking to a global perspective now, but sort of was incubated in your experiences being a part of this generation of Europeans who could experience and connect with other cultures in a way that so many others had more friction in doing before.
I don't think any of us did an Erasmus. Obviously, it's easier to connect with someone if you have some sort of shared experience. So if you were able to travel to that place, that's great. But we realized very quickly that we literally share the same hopes and dreams across borders. And I know it sounds super cheesy to say this, but I really mean it. We connect with people from Nairobi, and I'm from Paris, and Laura's from Rome, and then people in Seattle, in the US, and in Hong Kong, working together to try to change the world. We have the same hope that by uniting and by working together, we can actually try to solve issues that go beyond borders. And I think it really creates maybe a virtual, but a shared experience that is even stronger in a way than being able to travel to a place.
After working for 2 years on a pan-European political party that you started, Colombe and Andrea, and you elected your third partner to the European Parliament, you were the first people to attempt and succeed at creating a pan-European party. You decided to shift your focus. You Colombe, in your TED Talk, describe looking Andrea in the eyes and having a hard conversation about whether or not Volt was the most impactful work that you could be doing and whether you needed to change your focus. And that has led to where you are today. But I want to talk to you about that moment. Why did you decide to shift away from working on a party, a pan-European party at Volt, to a movement, which is what you're focused on today?
The focus with Volt was always to try to impact change, right? So to make the world somehow a better place. And just to give you a bit of background, we started working on Volt on the idea that we have a political European Union, but we don't have political parties. So to put it into context, it's like if in the United States, you had states parties, but no federal consistency, which would be really weird to govern the US. So we started thinking about this after Brexit. It was kind of a shock, not necessarily that it happened, but that we were in the situation where a country was leaving the EU, something that kept us more or less in peace since the Second World War, and that really led to a lot of prosperity. And we believed, and still do, at least I do, and I'm sure that Andrea would agree on this, that we needed to try to do something to keep the European Union together and to solve European problems. And it became logical that, if you don't have European politics, you can't really solve European problems. So we should try to create it by creating a pan-European party. And 2 years in, we elected Damien, and Afrad co-founder, and a couple of people at the local level. And this was a great success. And Vote will continue to run, and I hope succeed. But it was for European issues. The point is, you can't solve global issues at a European level. And after the European elections, kind of taking a step back, we did have this really hard conversation because we worked a lot in the last 3 years on this, but of asking ourselves, what do we actually want to achieve? What are we putting all of this energy in for? And we realized that we wanted to try to solve global issues. And by global issues, I don't mean an abstract concept, but climate change goes beyond Europe, beyond the US, beyond individual countries and continents. So does the fact that Amazon or Facebook are not taxed in every country. And you have a lot of problems like this that just can't be solved within one single country. And so we thought that we ought to try to unite people beyond borders and beyond continents. And so we decided to use those techniques that we learned in the last few years of mobilizing people across borders at the grassroots level, of creating local teams that, organize, discuss, and impact change. And to bring this at a more global level.
What was that decision hard to start over again, or was it not such a hard decision? It just made complete sense, and you knew that was what you needed to do.
Look, I think that it was definitely hard. Every time you invest, I think, a lot of energy and passion in a project, moving on to something else is very, very painful and difficult. But I think that once you realize that you could do more in a different way, and also like the previous project will still be running without major difficulties, I think it's not really a decision. It's more like you must do it. At least it's how me and Colombe saw it. So definitely there was a period of, hey, let's take this decision. It's not easy, but we must do it. But then after the switch was made, I think that the first call we had with people from Nairobi, people from Buenos Aires, people from Toronto, discussing how we could actually launch a campaign together and mobilize people across borders, it repaid of all the sorrows and difficulties that we went through the transition. So I think yes, I think that for whoever is listening, if you're planning to change project, it's always tough, but I think it's definitely worth it if you're sure of yourself.
Yeah. So on January 1 of this year of 2020, you announced now officially a global movement aimed at bringing citizens from all over the world, like you said, to work together to tackle the issues that are global and are really important, like rising nationalism, the fact that democracies are eroding, climate change. And how did you bridge maybe some of the work you were doing from Volt to now? Was there any overlap in the volunteers, the people you were working with, or did you see it as sort of starting from step zero?
As Andrea said, a switching project also requires a bit a switch in mentality in a way. So we wanted to make sure, one, because we still believe that Volt is needed, that we didn't take the members away or the volunteers away, but that both projects are needed, we believe, for the world. So we did a lot of outreach, and it sounds weird, but literally tweeting at people, being like, "Oh, are you interested in joining a global movement? We saw you're active on those topics. Let's talk."
No, this is exactly what I want to hear. This is the details that no one ever talks about. Like, how do you start a global movement? I'm just so curious. It's such a big vision, but what are the small ways that it starts?
So I can tell you practically, first you express the idea and everyone laughs at you because it sounds really weird. The concrete steps were we needed funds to be able to launch it, to create a tech infrastructure for people to join from all across the world. Because to be a movement, it can't just be actions on the street. People need to communicate. They need to unite. They need to work together. And when you work globally, Facebook is not really an option because in China, you don't have access to it. Or WhatsApp is not as available everywhere and so on. So we had to create our own tools. And so we launched a very simple, I'm a bit ashamed of it now, but like a very, very simple web page saying we wanted to launch a global movement and we needed help. And we asked people to buy their memberships in advance. And this enabled us to create the tech and get started. And then, we tweeted at people, talked a bit about it on Facebook and so on. And the first day, we literally had a few thousand people who joined and thought, oh my God, this is one, a bit weird, but second, we think it's needed. So let's try it and let's see how it goes.
What did those early days look like when you were working on Now? How much of the platform did you need to develop in advance, and how much of it did you want to co-create? And what else was on your mind?
I think I can give a bit of the perspective of someone that was amongst the thousands that joined on the first day. And now, looking back, it was 10 months ago. And every time Colombe and Andrea say, oh, like when we saw you joining us, on the 1st of January, we thought, why? Like, why is she not celebrating the new year? But I think it was a fantastic time to join. And I think as someone that was a volunteer first, everything looked really new. And, as Colombe mentioned, there was a very small website. And at the beginning, I remember we would get in touch with people from all over the world through small groups online. And then it kind of developed into something bigger through the months by creating, a more organized website, and then a forum where people can meet with others, where we can discuss and brainstorm on campaigns, to brainstorm on ideas and bringing up solutions on global topics. And so I think that you could really see the shift into something that was going in the right direction. And then throughout the months, even the first 2-3 months, you saw communities starting to building around one point person in different cities. And through that, we, Andrea and Colombe first, and then I joined as well. We started building a better website, a forum that could be really inclusive and could really bring people together. These are things that we continue to evolve every day, but I think that there has been a huge shift already.
Yeah, it sounds like a very iterative process. You build as you go.
I think that what this shows is that if you have the passion, if you have the commitment, everyone can build anything. And I'm not saying it like as a motivational guru in a conference, but actually because it's true. I mean, Colombe and I started, as we said, we never travel most of the continents we named before. We don't know many cultures. We are learning as we go. But with a good idea and a small initial investment of a website, for example, we managed to build a community that then supported itself and grew and now is actually present in more than 100 countries.
One thing that really stands out to me about both of you, Andrea and Colombe, is there's something about your ability to communicate that I think if you say we're trying to reunite people in a global movement, it might feel abstract to people, or they might expect it to feel kind of the corporate politics that we're used to in some ways. But Andrea and Colombe, if you can just share some of how you think about that communication.
Yeah, I think the main thing is we actually think about it in the real world. So in the sense, we don't think of big concepts for 3 months and how we can actually implement it and then talk about it with very complicated words. One, because we work in English and English is not my native language, so it would be very hard. But second, it's just we have an idea, we try it out, and we talk about it with people. And it sounds like an easy way of going about it, but it's actually very true. If you stop someone on the streets and ask them what are the biggest issues they're facing, you will realize that it's the same across borders. And we actually did this. Like we do a lot, I mean, now with COVID, it's a bit changed, but we used to do a lot of physical on the ground events, signature collections in the street, listening tours and so on. And you just realize that people literally give you the same answers. They want a safe future. They want to be able to live in an affordable house. They want a job. And then, yes, they also want to be able to survive the climate crisis. They want to live in a democracy and so on. And from the moment you actually base it on people and not very abstract concept of a global democracy or of a global tax system, but what this would mean for our everyday lives, I think it's much easier to communicate. And then the people you meet also give you the tools on how to communicate, right? Like I told you at first, my friends laughed a lot at me, but it's because I had no idea how to talk about what I was trying to create. it was just too abstract. It didn't resonate at all. And then we started, and that's actually how we met Laura at first, in an event in London that we did in a pub. And we were trying to explain what we're trying to do, and people were telling us, well, actually, this for me is not really a concern, or for me, this is something that I don't really see how I can impact change across borders. But have you thought of women's rights? Have you thought of democracy? And so on. And for me, it's really just a process of co-creation with people, of listening and trying to understand how to actually impact change for us all, and not just on a theoretical level. It's then much easier to communicate.
I love that. I really appreciate that. And I think that's something that when I look at community builders beyond political, just the political sphere, it's the center of the job is listening and reflecting back to the community, whether it's in services or tools or in stories and language, what it is that those people actually want, instead of kind of building for them from a distance with an abstract approach, or like you said, a theoretical approach. Laura, I want to talk to you about your work a little bit. You know, this one of the things that really struck me in learning more about now is that you're having, I think, weekly events that are, like you said, hosting conversations about topics important to people who are part of now or considering perhaps being a part of now. And I'm curious, just, you know, I don't hear about many people in my life who are politically activated going to weekly events to discuss these issues with a broader base of people. And why did you decide to host these events? And can you tell us a little bit about the design of them, how they work?
Of course. When Andrea and Colombe launched Now, they probably didn't imagine a pandemic hitting on us. But I think that, you know, having the possibility through a screen to connect with people from all over the world is already something amazing. And, you know, what we really wanted to do is focus a lot of the work that we do on our volunteers, because these are people that from all over the world decide to give up their time to push forward our campaigns. And those are the people that have the most creative ideas, the most innovative ways, the greatest solutions that you can think of to move global issues and understand them from a local lens as well. We engage with volunteers in different ways. One of the ways that you just mentioned is through weekly events that we do. So every week we host community chats, which are basically events for our members and our community to come together and talk about global topics from a local perspective. And the reason why we do this is because, as Andrea and Colombe mentioned, a lot of the volunteers and, you know, like us, they haven't traveled around the world. They don't know many cultures. They might not have knowledge about how a global issue might affect people in a specific country. So we really wanted to be able to bring the community together, but not only to have nice conversations, because sometimes, you know, the topics that we tackle may be quite difficult and quite hard to understand from different perspectives. But you know, we really wanted to use these community chats to put together people that can share their experience and knowledge and think about how global issues are affecting them at the local level. And this is fundamental for what we do. And to answer your second question on how we approach designing these events, I think that we're super lucky because we have volunteers that are really passionate about what they want to talk about. So it's amazing when we see volunteers coming to us and tell us, I would really love to do this event on women's rights in Tunisia. And I just mentioned this, but in the past months, we were able to hear from people from all over the world on so many different topics, you know, from LGBTQI rights to how technology is impacting democracy around the world. And so we were able to give them this platform to present their topics, but also to be ready to discuss it with people that might have different views. might come from a different perspective, but they are very much willing to listen to each other.
In our community chat, we actually bringing together the community, we get very good ideas for our campaigns. And we have a very specific example. Our pro-democracy campaign was started after a community chat, or more like what we call a virtual town hall. There is the same of a community chat with members, but where we invite an external guest, with the activist Joshua Wong from Hong Kong. And basically he told our community the story of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong struggle, and how basically democracy is being eroded there. And because of the chat that we had, our community started feeling very clearly an urge to do something. And so from that, we crafted a campaign, and we actually started, I think so far, one of the most popular campaigns that we have launched on democracy. And it's interesting because it came really from one of these moments of sharing and coming together. It wasn't on our radar before. We were thinking about other topics, and this made clear to us there was a need that our community wanted to tackle.
I know that you organize people in different cities around the world to protest at the Chinese embassies in their countries. And that to me just really demonstrates the global power that you have if you are a global movement to show up physically and put pressure on these global systems in more than one location.
So we have a global community, but that's not the purpose. We want to impact global change. We think there are global problems that exist, and we can only solve them by working together. Ideally, our governments would be capable of cooperation. It's often not the case, unfortunately. So we have to unite as people across the world to demand that they do better. But I do believe that there's a huge power in on-the-ground protest events and so on that is often much stronger than digitally, which is why COVID makes all of this a bit difficult sometimes. And on this campaign that you just mentioned, basically, we noticed, as Andrea said, the fact that democracy has been backing down and in retreat for now, I think 5 consecutive years. And in some places, it's obviously worse, like in Hong Kong, like the current genocide happening against the Uyghurs and so on. And we very quickly, after a lot of discussions with members, realized that there's not really any way for people that are directly affected by authoritarian regimes to succeed alone. Sometimes it happens, and that's great. But when you have a country that is so powerful like China, you need the international community to rally behind those actually fighting for freedom. And so we designed a campaign where we call for the creation of the League of Democracies, so for big economic powers that are democracies to unite and actually impose economic and diplomatic sanctions on those responsible for those democratic and human rights violations. But all of those are big words as well, and it's hard to communicate, and it's hard to mobilize governments behind this simple idea. So with volunteers, we came out with the idea that we would start hosting weekly protests, at first in front of Chinese embassies, and we're now moving them in front of governments' buildings. And they're happening in more than 40 cities. Online, they reach more than 3 million people, to demand that big democratic powers actually start acting and doing something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, looking at your website, you have people everywhere from South Sudan to Russia to the Philippines, all around the world. And I'm just amazed at the ability to create global conversations.
Tell me more about what happens at a community chat, and how does that ladder up to, what you want the outcome to be?
So I think that, community chats are just an example of what we do with volunteers by organizing local teams around the campaigns, the global issues that we have. But definitely, community chats are another good way to bring people together that perhaps wouldn't meet through those local teams. Agreeing to disagreeing during community chats is one of the most important thing. And I think that because we established pretty strong guidelines that are, rooted in the values of now, during those community chats, people are very respectful about each other and about different views. And the way that we organize them is pretty simple. We have volunteers that decide to host the community chat. They propose a topic, and the topic needs to have a global perspective, but the whole point is for them to bring their local knowledge. And the person that hosts the event decides to either prepare a presentation or have an interactive way for people to discuss the topic, but they present the main topic for 20-25 minutes, and then we open the floor to a very open discussion. And most of the time people may not agree on everything, but I think that because if they are here and now, it means that they hopefully believe in our core values. It's often an amazing time for people to understand each other perspectives and perhaps even changing their mind about some topics.
It's very important to put also in perspective that the community chat were very important, especially during the peak of COVID, and maybe for a few extra months it will be the case. But the idea is that after this period, we're going to go back to activate a lot of teams on the ground. And I mean, protests and action are still going on all over the world in our organization. And we have teams fighting for democracy and for the rights in front of different institutions and different level of government. And so hopefully we're going to be able to transform this model of virtual community chat that are very powerful because bring together people from all over the world to also become local, more locally focused community chat. So where people come together physically and discuss topics, and we try to bridge the problem that often happens in communities, sadly all over the world, of division and very strong, especially political lines that divide people. And so I hope that this community chat that we run will be a way to bridge that gap that for me are tearing a bit apart as society.
One of the big insights we've had from our interviews and research we've had with so many different communities is that thriving communities need what we call a shared activity, which is sort of like the equivalent of what church once was, is something that happens on Sunday. People can expect it to happen, and it convenes the community together with a sense of sort of focus. I think as I hear you talk about these community chats, they might seem like a small thing from the outside, but they really allow people to tap into the purpose of now, which is to learn more about global issues and to connect with other people who feel the way that they do and kind of manifest that sense of unity. It's not something that I think, especially within the party system or the movements I see in the United States, I see a real gap there in terms of these repeatable, purposeful, participatory activities that I plug into with regard to the politics that I care about.
When you see people actually having this common activity that you talk about, I think it's way more around our campaigns, because the way we chose to organize our members and volunteers has been hyper-local, so at the city, village, or town level, and around the campaigns that we're running. So people are getting involved with one campaign, whether it be on, sharing COVID vaccines across the world, stopping climate change, increasing democracy or women's rights or else. And they push forward this campaign at the local level as a team. And they also meet digitally, they meet physically, they do actions, but they have those weekly activities, those weekly meetings. And we also create those rituals to make sure that it's, as you said, an activity that the community engages around. So from having music to speeches and so on, that are quite similar. And then we'll meet as a group with the team to discuss how they feel about it, because certain topics are very emotionally loaded for people that are directly connected to them. So when you have you protest for Hong Kong and you have a big group of Hong Kongers that had to flee their home city to be able to live freely, it's not an easy thing to do, to put yourself out there like this. But then also organize and understand how to impact change further. So I think the community chat is definitely one of the ways, but I would say it's more of a peripheral one where we share stories. We have some about very different topics, from mental health in a pandemic to whatever. But the core of at least what amazes me with the members we have is that they really put themselves out there. Sometimes it's not that easy when you know the consequences it can have, and whether they do it physically or digitally, to actually impact change. So they don't just talk. And I think that's the thing I'm the proudest of, at least, is we really managed to create a community of doers, not only of talkers, which is often the case, but people who will always look at how they can impact the world more, how they can impact change.
Laura, I want to ask you, as someone who began as a volunteer and now is doing a lot of the work, as far as I can tell, interacting with people who are on the ground, what has been one of the most powerful moments for you thus far since now began?
Really at the beginning, when I had a first meeting with the London team, as Colombe said, we have those local teams on the ground. And this was at the beginning of February, when we were still meeting people face to face, long time ago. But at that time, I was a volunteer at Now, and I remembered the moment that Andrea actually sent me an email, and he was like, "Hey, Laura, I saw that you're in London. We don't have a local team yet. Do you want to take the lead?" It was an amazing push for me, because at the time, I think I definitely needed an exciting escape from my daily job. So I didn't think about it twice. And, I started building together a team. And it was a very special moment, because when I start sending out email, it was to people that I've never met before, that I could only see their names online. And I thought, who knows what's going to happen after this. And I remember that within the space of, I think, 2-3 days, I had already been contacted by 2 other women who were here in London at the time. And they were like, we heard of it. We want to help. Tell us what we can do. It felt like super surreal, because you end up meeting people that you've never met before, but also with whom like you only spoke maybe once on the phone. But when we first met, I think that was one of the most powerful moments, because everything started coming together. I went from, sitting in my room, imagining ways in which I could impact change. And then there we were. We were a team of 3 people that, were pushing other people to start acting rather than just listening.
Andrea, one thing that I spotted in your background is that you used to be a management consultant. And one question I want to ask you, given what I probably know about your brain and way of thinking, is, what's one of the clearest learnings you've had or had reinforced through your experience of building a party and now a movement for 4 years? What sticks out to you?
So yes, I'm guilty. I used to be a management consultant. I think that, if I look back and what I did in the past and what we're doing right now, I think really the main lesson I've learned is that anything is possible. And it sounds such a basic thing, but actually, if you put the time, the energy, and the passion, you can make your cause, the issue that you care about, something that other people care about. And this is the beginning of everything. When you create a team, a group of people that actually want to take action with you in a particular matter, you are halfway to the success. And for me, this is the biggest learning, because I had no clue. When I started being more interested in politics and social change, I really thought about it as almost as a startup mentality. Like, okay, we need to have the operations running, we need to have the activities being super focused. And then actually I realized that this comes after. The really important thing is to find the right people to push forward a dream, an idea, project. And I think in politics, in social mobilization, for me, really the people focus, and that's why I really like the name of your organization, is the most important thing, because one is the only thing that can make change happen. So for me, this is the biggest learning of the last 3 years, and then I can go ahead for with many other learnings, but this is very fundamental for me.
I appreciate you saying that. And it's funny because, we always tell people to start with the who brings the energy right now, and who's the most important to whatever impact you're trying to have. And if you can focus on the who, then you can determine, what those people want and how to build structures for them. But starting with the who and perhaps a small group of people, I mean, we're talking 5 to 10 people even, really big things grow from a small group of passionate people. And I feel like the world has made us doubt that as a truth. I appreciate you emphasizing that point from your perspective. What message do you have for the folks who are listening right now?
So I would bounce on what Andrea just said. It starts with you, and it starts with 1 or 2 people. And we're not just saying this, for, as Andrea said before, as a motivational guru speech, but it's actually very true. I mean, what we're trying to do is in itself completely insane, to create something global and mobilize people across borders and solve global issues that are some of the biggest of our times. It's beyond my comprehension on many good days. But I think from the moment you believe that something needs to be done, who else to try than yourself in the first place? So what I would tell the listeners is, look, I think there's very few people today who could say that we can't make the world better, that we can't improve the current situation. And whatever topic you care about, right? Whether it's, human rights, the economy, unemployment, fiscal justice, or else, there's a lot of room to improve. There's a lot of room to make the world a better place. Then the only question is, what are you going to do about it? In an ideal planet, you would have very responsible politicians who will be able to collaborate across borders and do it. In today's world, unfortunately, there needs to be a push from people on the ground. And from a pragmatic perspective, my main point is you have nothing to lose, literally nothing. So I would ask people to actually start taking action. If you like what we said, join now. But if not, create your own global movement, or, create your own music label to connect people across the world through music. I don't know. It could be anything, but do something. We don't have the luxury at the end of 2020, after a pandemic, after waiting for big economic recessions to come and so on, for the world to suddenly become a better place. We are responsible for this, and we have a lot of power to do so. Bailey, you said it often starts with 5 to 10 people, and I completely agree. The amount of things and the amount of mountains we can move with 5 to 10 people willing to put the energy, the time, the passion to do it is incredible. And so I would really ask everyone to do whatever you can with whatever time you have available to change the world. And also, as a side note, it's fun. It's also a great thing to do along the way, because I don't just want to be depressing about, the world is terrible, we need to act. It's also beautiful. But being able to connect with people from across the world, being able to work on all of those topics and actually have hope that there's a way forward and that you might be part of it, and that, you meet people who are willing to give everything to change the world, is incredible. It gives a new meaning to life.
Thank you so much for this interview. And I'm just so inspired by what you've built, truly.
If you want to connect with Now, you can reach them at now.world. You can become a member there and even join a local Now group. Thank you to our team. Thank you to Rosanna Caban for engineering and editing, Greg David for his design work, and Katie O'Connell for marketing this episode.
You can find out more about the work we do as People and Company, helping organizations get clearer on who their most important communities are and how to build with those people by heading to our website, peopleand.company. Also, if you want to start your own community or supercharge one you're already a part of, our handbook is here for you. Visit gettogetherbook.com to grab your copy. It's beautiful, and it's full of stories and learnings from conversations with community leaders like this one with the Now team. And last thing, if you've got the energy here at the end of the podcast, we'd love if you'd click review of this podcast or click subscribe. Click. That really helps get these stories out to more people and promote stories of folks like Now.
It's probably more of a tap,
It's a tap.
People
It's
on
a
their
tap.
phones, maybe?
That's right.
Maybe not. What's the percentage on mobile?
Tippity tap.
Wow. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Okay, bye.